I'm going to turn it over to Dave Musgrave. Dave Musgrave is our regional manager from IMEC, the Illinois Manufacturing Excellence Center. He's led a couple of our different Excellence Forum, and we've been working with him for years. He's such a great wealth of information. And he also has invited our friend Jim Floyd, who is a wonderful technical expert and definitely a expert within the lean world. And so I'll let you tell a little bit more about your backgrounds. Maybe do you want to, Jim, do you want to come off and just tell a little bit more about your expertise and what you can bring to the table here at this event?
Sure. Thanks, Kathy. And hello, everyone. So as Kathy mentioned, my background is lean. Most of what I've learned has been born out of the Danaher Business System. So I was very fortunate to have been with that organization and worked with some of the best in the industry. So I bring a lot of that knowledge and experience to the table and share that knowledge with all of our clients to help them do what they do better. So yes, if you have any questions in particular that have to do with anything in the lean realm, strategy deployment, I'll be more than happy to discuss that with the team. So,
excellent. Thanks so much. And Dave, why don't you take it away? Tell us a little bit about your background as well.
Yeah, before coming back, I held leadership positions, executive leadership positions with several family-owned and private equity-held companies and ran plants globally. Spent probably about half my time outside of the United States. And, my background is operations supply chain, so this subject is near and dear to my heart because I always enjoyed empowering people to make improvements within their organization and help celebrate that. But I also enjoyed having folks like Jim, who I worked with, who had such a deep and broad tool set to draw from, because I was always learning and I continue to learn. And so this is just a great opportunity to kind of keep doing that and paying it forward.
Excellent. So I'll let Dave take it over and kind of he's going to tell you a little bit about the judge's experience. And if you make it to because the journey for the SPART with regards to the benchmarking is if you opt into the competition and are one of the top assessors, then you'll get to have an interview with the judges. So some of this is going to be just to do with the category and specifically the questions that are within, so you can have a little more insight there. But some of it's also going to be about, like what are the judges looking for too? What is a good, better, and best, scenario when you're checking those boxes. So I'll let you take it away.
Thank you. So just a couple of administrative items before we get started here. So this forum is for you, and so as both Kathy and Jim alluded, if you have questions, please raise your hand. Either jump in and feel free to interrupt or use the chat or whatever. But like I said, this is really all for you as we cover this as we. We want and encourage participation. Otherwise, it'll make our meeting today very boring. Then we're going to talk about the Adley model, looking at that, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And then, what I've done is I've pulled out key information or traits, if you will, of our finalists from last year. And then we're going to go through each one of those and talk about it. And we're going to talk about, maybe what good, better, best looks like. We'll also start talking about each of your own individual journeys and, how might I be able to either start my journey or I'm in the middle of my journey and how can I proceed? Then we'll have a couple of questions, sample questions from the actual benchmarking survey. So you can kind of take a look at that and we can talk about, how might you be able to answer those and things like that. And then what we're going to wrap up is, a couple of ways where we could support you in your journey. And so we're hoping to cover that in about 45 to 60 minutes, and then we'll have, 15 plus minutes for any Q&A. So if you look at this first slide here, why operational excellence? And, you can read all the textbooks and see right after World War II, the Japanese, Toyota, they embraced it. And they did wonderful things with it from a operations manufacturing standpoint. And then we, in America, back in the 80s, really started looking at this and started working towards implementation. But really it comes down to a couple different things is, how can I impact my business, make it more profitable, make it more efficient, et cetera, not only for our external stakeholders, but for our internal stakeholders too, right? Because, you got employees in your organization that they come to work every day, seeing how they can do a great job for you. And I really look at it from 4 pillars within an organization. You got people, process, systems, and structure. And if you kind of take a look at that there and go to the graphic that I pulled out on the right-hand side there, I really like this bullseye, right? Because if you think about it, if you want to look at it from a good, better, best standpoint and use this graphic, that bullseye right there is the North Star, right? That is you're there. You are top tier, or you're a DVS, maybe or a General Electric, or any other organizations that really have a long-term OpEx lean infrastructure. Then if you look at the green part, there's the 4 items there that really kind of help build that. You got the strategy, performance, process excellence, and high performance work team. But really the value is, if you look at that blue ring, here are some of the key elements that feed those, right? So if we just take a look at the, process excellence, right? You're looking at lean management. So what is lean management? Well, it could be value stream mapping. It could be 5S. It could be lean daily management. You have 8D for root cause analysis, problem quality resolution. But it kind of ramps right into that process excellence, and then it goes into the operational model. So from a good, better, best standpoint, from a judge's perspective, we're looking at, those different areas, where you're at, what have you done, what have your impacts been, and, what is your journey? Because part of it is, you can get to a certain point, but what are you doing forward looking to continue that improvement? And so that is always very compelling. So I'm going to pause here. It'd be great for 1 or 2 folks just to kind of jump off mute and share your journey, where you're at, trials, tribulations, successes, or any assistance you may want. Don't be shy.
So I'll share.
Thank you, Erin.
I'm from Flint Scientific. And, I'll just kind of top line it. We're trying to get away from it. I'll speak from an HR standpoint only. Trying to get away from the day-to-day firefighting that goes on and put more automated processes in place. We've been very successful in doing that in a very short amount of time. But it takes a minute to get that off the ground, and there's certain pain points in doing so. Just not everyone is as comfortable with technology as the next. And so sometimes in our effort to stop the firefighting, it inadvertently kind of slows us down. But being able to see the forest through the trees has been helpful. But yeah, I would say one of our biggest, hurdles has been just kind of like stop the madness, stop the firefighting, and put processes into place that help us operate more strategically than just in the day-to-day.
That's awesome. Thank
you for sharing that. And, a couple of things I kind of picked up there was, you're looking at how can you get the people engaged. But there's a huge culture piece to this as well, right? Because you're looking at how can I shift that culture from doing the firefighting to more of a regimented approach. So I definitely appreciate that. I see Nero, is that correct? You have your hand up?
Good morning. Yeah.
Good morning.
Narelle.
Narelle.
So piggybacking off of that, we're pretty early in on our journey. And when we try to sit and have a meeting and have a process that we all agree on, I'm just interested if anybody has found a structure or a piece of software to house all that in a way that makes it logical and accessible to everybody because for a while we had a really highly tenured staff, so we all kind of knew, but there's all this content and knowing where to go to get it. We tried to make our own internal drive, and just be interested if there's some piece of software or any tips that people have that as they create these, that they don't end up sitting in an email or sitting, you know, in some, but that's one of our pain points. That I know we recreated content because it's just a little bit of a mess. I just go to my internal network drive and hit search and hope I use the words that the person who created the process used, if that makes sense.
We use a lot of Teams drive, so everybody on Teams can use the shared files.
Okay.
And then the other thing that we use is SharePoint. Another thing I can offer with that is Microsoft, I think it's called Programs, and it kind of tracks your progress on different initiatives that you're working on, and everyone who's working on it can see and who's responsible for what.
Super, that helps. Yeah, I know Teams were underutilizing, so that helps point me back to using that. Thank you.
Yeah, and then like kind of before Teams, we were using just a share drive.
Yep, that's
where
what
everybody, yeah. So, you know, those three things. And the thing that's nice about Teams is if you also put it in the Teams chat, then you have two ways of searching it.
Mm-hmm.
So just some tips there that have worked for
Thank you.
us.
We use Teams and the files within Teams under different groups quite frequently. I'd be interested in having you restate that Microsoft program. That sounded really interesting because I'm not familiar with that, but we also use on Microsoft OneNote. OneNote allows you to sort of build a page and then everyone can edit. There's a little bit of tracking going along with it. So if you're trying to build something, it's a nice group way, as well as Teams, I suppose, in terms of files. But the OneNote gives us kind of when you open OneNote, you have different table of contents that are very clear, and it's a go-to place. So we had some help in that regard. And then just one other comment, but I don't want to lose my questions I had before, is that we're a pretty lean company. We rely on third-party people, third-party manufacturers, et cetera. So when we don't necessarily spend all our time putting out firefighters, but we do spend a lot of our time just actively managing the business, the incoming POs, the outgoing shipping, the manufacturing, et cetera, because we have few people. But what we implemented this in 2023, along with the help of Jeff Johnson, one of our service providers with LMI. I actually hired him kind of offline from his normal coursework, and he helped develop a project planning system where we have strategic projects. Different people are leaders. We kind of and the idea with strategic projects is that we're taking the time. We're forcing people away from their day-to-day work because people will fill up their day-to-day work, and we're forcing them to take a portion of their time and invest it in strategic projects that are beneficial to the company. So those are my comments.
Thank you.
You provided is going to be wonderful to kind of build on in the next few slides. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. Before we go to the next slide, does anybody else have anything they'd like to share? All right,
David.
Yeah, go ahead.
You know, listening to those that have shared so far. You know, with regard to losing digital content or not having that organized, just kind of applying some of our lean systems. You've got 5S workplace organization. many times people think that's just, maybe the shop floor, or you could use it in the office to help organize things. So there's a place for everything and everything is in its place. But what's easily and most often overlooked is the digital realm as well. We can actually apply 5S workplace organization practices to the digital realm and make sure that there's a place for everything and everything is in its place, that it's neat and organized, easy to access. You mentioned several tools, Teams, SharePoint, OneNote, all great tools, but they get cluttered. And so we need to have the discipline to make sure that we go through and keep that uncluttered, if you will, and take the time to just deploy good 5S workplace organization practices. So with Skip talking about strategic projects, so true, to have that standard work for your leaders so that they are carving out a certain part of their daily or weekly time to focus on working on the business versus in the business. And maybe that gets back to what we'll talk about eventually is the strategic deployment piece. So looking forward to just exploring that more with everyone in their experiences.
Right, this here kind of captures
The best practices when we looked at the finalists as far as using the ADLI model. Obviously, if you're not familiar with ADLI, it's an approach to organizational learning and implementation of best practices, looking at strategic planning all the way down to developing the objectives and then driving that down into tactical execution. And so there's 4 categories: approach, deployment, learning, integration. And what we're going to do over the next 4 slides is really kind of go into each one of these pillars, if you will, and kind of dig into it from a team standpoint and just, share, operational learnings or things you're doing that are working. And then if there are questions or everything like that, then obviously we can kind of talk about that as well. All right, so the first one is on the approach. And so, if you think about it from an approach standpoint, there's things as far as strategic planning and deployment, continuous improvement, and KPI and metric development. And as Aaron, Skip, and Narelle shared, they are using technology to do that. And one of the things that popped in my mind is, I'm assuming they're collecting all this robust data, right? All these KPIs and some analysis. And so I was looking at it from a deployment standpoint, how is that getting down to the shop floor? And we could talk about that either now or, in one of the other slides here. But, from an approach standpoint, how many folks here have a strategic plan that doesn't sit on the shelf, that it's living and it's breathing, and you review it either in your monthly or quarterly management reviews and you update it and things like that? And, how do you look at your continuous improvement program, and what are some of the core KPIs or metrics that you've developed?
None yet.
I'm sorry?
None yet.
Okay. So Brian, you're sharing that right now you don't have a strategic plan, but that might be something you're interested in, or
Yeah, I'm working with my team to we're creating our first vision statement. We're creating our first set of goals. Over the last 6 years of operating the business, we've been fortunate to never even have to bother making a budget. We just spent the money comfortable spending, and we never even came close to spending more than our customers are willing to pay us for our services. And so we keep things real lean, and we try to be kind to our customers and just not spend too much money. And since we're essentially a service business, but we work in manufacturing here at Deep Coat Industries is our company. I didn't introduce myself. We're a coatings company. Most of our work is in, or our cost is in the act of coating, not procuring materials or keeping warehouse space. So we've kind of just moseyed along while we made ourselves available for growth for the last 6 years. And the company almost quadrupled in size over the last 6 years. And so we've come into pretty painful, I'll say good painful end of 2023 where we realized, shoot, we need systems for everything now. And so we're starting to try to kind of add controls and add processes and add backup plans and add, I'll say, like cross training or when someone's unavailable, who's the backup person for that. And so as I'm trying to get a lot of that in place, there's a lot of these strategic planning kind of facets to that of what happens if I win the lottery. I'll use that example instead of get hit by a bus and things of that nature.
That's it's a good story.
I mean, you've grown and significantly, and so now you're at a point where the business has significant scale, and so you need to take a little bit of a step back and say, okay, you know, how can I make it a little bit more structured, a little bit more sustainable, and everything like that. Anybody on the meeting today want to share maybe how they've done that? Maybe they've been in a position where Brian's at, and then they've looked at developing a strategic plan and how they've done that.
Well, I just share.
From a judge's perspective, maybe weaving a little bit of my own personal experience. When we're looking at the companies that were in the finalist, and we looked at this here, you know, they all had some level of a strategic plan, and they had some means to deployment. And so, you know, they would have maybe a revenue objective. They may have profitability objectives. They would have a cost containment or cost reduction goals and things like that. And they'd have that there in the framework of a 3-year plan. And then they would have your annual operating plan as a subset of that, which is that's your tactical execution. These are the things that you want to try to achieve during this, 12-month time period. And so if you look at the next two items, the continuous improvement and KPI metric development, those were there to help support and achieve those objectives, right? So from a continuous improvement, looking at cost containment as an example, maybe they went in there and some of them went and did 80-20 analysis on their supply chain, just to see if there's opportunities to consolidate, maybe use some of their FRED indices to see about negotiating and things like that. So there's some good, robust activity there. But what was also interesting, a couple of clients did that same analysis with their client base. What they found was that some of their clients weren't as profitable as they thought they were. And if they looked at the number of times they ordered and the quantity, from a service level perspective, they were overserving clients, meaning they were breaking it into A, B, C, D buckets, right? Who are my high value clients and going down the line there. And they had the KPI metrics to help support that. So, many of the companies, had a lot of this framework in place and were really kind of going down that journey. And it was just really good to see that. So I'm just going to pause again and see if there's anybody that would like to maybe jump in, maybe share some information, or do you have questions on this? Here is like, hey, how do I start? Where do I begin?
I guess I'll say a few words about what we do at Vertec, and that is we have regular board of directors meetings.
Mm-hmm.
And for that board of director meeting, I put together certainly performance reports, but annually I'll put together what I really refer to, which would be the 1-year operating plan. Mm-hmm. Sort of a forecast and in the different areas of the company where we're going to what we're going to do, whether that's mm-hmm. in the areas of marketing relative to the website, SEO, or whether it has to do with research and development and areas we might be going into, coatings, development, etc. So those are put in place. The team, the company, everybody that is in the company is aware of these plans and we implement them throughout the year. I think what's lacking is maybe a more broad 3-year strategic plan and then the integration of the 1-year plan into the 3-year plan and just the whole structure of that, which I think would bring probably a lot of benefits to the company, not only in terms of meeting those plans, but also the employees being a little more engaged. I mean, there's always opportunity for more engagement, and understanding and be able to make their decisions more confidently because they know that it fits into that overall strategic plan or even the operational plan.
That's a great example of, insights of, how you can, obviously you're doing work today and it's benefiting the organization, but, think about how might I be able to make that better and improve it. And circling back into the people, process, systems, and structure, right? How can I get the people engaged, maybe have a little bit better process and look at a system of doing it. So no, that's awesome. For your board meetings, are those monthly or are they quarterly?
The board meetings, typically we do them 3 times a year.
Okay, all right.
Privately held company,
Sure.
and we don't, quarterly is actually a little too much, although we're looking at quarterly in 2024 because based on some things that are happening within the organization, but yeah, primarily 3 times a year.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, thank you for that. Anybody else on this?
I've got a question for you, Dave.
Sure.
In what I'll refer to as a few failed attempts in the past, or maybe just having allowed my company to kind of live in a turbulent zone of from reaction to proaction or proactivity over the last 6 years, I've tried to dole out projects in the past. I've tried to make KPIs in the past, and my team and myself, truly not setting a good example, always slid back into, well, the most recent email that came in the inbox is the one that I'm working on, and the most loudest phone call that just came in from a customer is the one I posted, and the product that showed up on our dock today is the stuff we're going to start coding, the stuff that got here yesterday. Oh, we'll code that once we're not coding the stuff that showed up on the dock today. When you are putting strategic plans or new KPIs in place, what are some of the maybe psychological or cultural guardrails that you've seen successfully set up to make sure that people don't respond to the ping on their phone and instead start following the process?
No, good question. Jim, did you want to share anything from your perspective as a lean expert?
Yeah, sure. I can, Dave. Thank you. And yeah, thank you, Brian and Skip, for kind of sharing some of your strategic, I guess, experiences with this. So, Brian, yeah, really, it takes a culture, right? We need to build a culture that is disciplined. And, how do we do that, right? How do we get away from just reacting, having a knee-jerk reaction to constantly firefighting and being distracted, kind of like the golden retriever, squirrel, and we're there. So yeah, it takes practice, and we have to really work at building that disciplined culture. Leader standard work is a great mechanism and tool whereby we basically agree to take portions of our day or portions of our week and commit to something. And we don't allow other things to weasel their way into that time. It is purely strategic time that we carve out to do certain things that we feel are critical to the success of the organization, working on the business. So that's one thing. I mean, it doesn't come easy. It takes time, it takes practice. You'll fall down and stumble and pick yourself back up, dust yourself off, and learn from mistakes that have happened through that. But it's just the diligence in carrying that through that you'll start to develop, a cadence, if you will, for having time to work on the business and do it well without the distractions. Even comes down to, right, there are studies on email. Are you the type of person that you're working at your desk and an email pops up and boom, you're jumping to it? Or are you the type of person that says, no, these emails are coming in, but I'm going to do my work uninterrupted. And at 10 o'clock, from 10 to 10:15, then I'm checking email. So you kind of have to build that, you have to practice it to build that discipline. It's difficult for those that aren't accustomed to that. And just to kind of level set what Dave's showing here on the screen, the approach, if you think about your strategic planning and deployment piece, that's addressing the future voice of the customer. Where do you need to position your organization in the next 3 to 5 years to meet that future voice of the customer? The last bullet point, the KPI metric development, deployment, that's kind of falls into the realm of what we call daily management. That is today's voice of the customer. So what are we doing today to meet today's voice of the customer, whether it's safety, quality, delivery, cost, those, general metric categories. So it's working with those two, and what happens in between those two is the continuous improvement efforts. When we do strategic planning and deployment, well, there's strategic planning. We, of course, have a vision statement. So what do we want to be when we grow up, if you will? What is that vision for the organization? And once we have that, that's kind of our North Star, we create a 3 to 5 year strategic business plan. And understanding what are our breakthroughs that we need to reach in order to achieve that 3 to 5 year strategic business plan, those breakthroughs have to now be broken down into what are we going to do this next coming fiscal year? All right, so it's kind of taking, how do we eat an elephant one bite at a time? So we take this 3 to 5 year plan and we break it into manageable chunks. What are we going to do this next fiscal year? And then how do we do that? And then how do we measure our success for doing that? And that builds out into specific action plans. And those action plans are worked on through your leader standard work. You're working on them daily, weekly, and it rolls up to a monthly review meeting where we're reviewing progress to plan so that there are no surprises. If we see that we're getting behind in something, we're developing countermeasures. We're understanding why we're getting behind, and we are adjusting as needed. So there is some structure that we can put behind this to help facilitate an organization meeting their strategic business plan, building out their daily management system with Gemba walks and getting people involved in having conversations to help sustain this for the organization. Some organizations that I've worked with and we've started to build out a daily management system, I'll ask them about their metrics. What do they measure? And some organizations, they measure everything and it's just overwhelming. It's so much noise. So then we focus it down to what Dave has here on the screen, KPI. It's the key performance indicators. Out of those 50 things that they're measuring, what are the top, say, 5 that they have to measure in the organization? Maybe at a plant level, maybe at a work center level. So it's keeping it simple, focused on those key things, again, focused on the voice of the customer. And it's through that process that we practice and we develop a discipline and we get really good at, understanding what we need to work on with the critical resources that we have. And it's just kind of bringing it all together from that perspective. So there is this framework that keeps the guardrails on our system and gives us structure to our organization, whereas maybe before we didn't have that structure and that culture.
Is that helpful, Brian?
As far as, looking at how you've done work previously, maybe a different approach or how you might put a structure over a duration to help with the implementation and sustainability of it?
Yeah, thank you for all that, Jim, and
Mhm.
it's a great question, Dave. Would love to ask another question or two on that subject, but I'm happy to defer them until the end of the meeting so we can cover all the things you wanted to, and other people get the chance to take some of your time as well. To answer your question there, Dave, I'll say over my last 20 to 25 years of working on things, I've developed a expertise in firefighting and being a crisis manager in different worlds, and that works great up to a certain point, but it doesn't scale, and that's the place we're at. I think, Jim, you were saying it earlier in your speech about scale, and it might have been you, Dave, but yeah, that's something that was fine when it's tiny, but now we're trying to get bigger and safe in every meaning of the word for our employees and our customers.
Thank you. All right. So now we're going to take a look at the next category, deployment in the EDLI, operational best practices. So what we saw is, some of the finalists, they were looking at order to cash integration, looking at it from a flow standpoint, all the way with how do I interact with my client, serve them properly, all the way to getting the order, processing order, fulfilling and ordering, basically on the back end of it, your receivables and things like that. They had some really good KPIs and foundational improvements there. But from a deployment standpoint, what was very interesting is they started talking about maybe some of the different pillars that would hang off of it, whether it was order entry or in the factory, really how they were transitioning from silos, if you will, individual silos that maybe a phrase I'd like to coin is, they would toss it over the wall to manufacturing. I've been on that side of the wall before, where everything was coming. But they really had a team-based approach cross-functionally, and it really drove good engagement and really good participation. And once they were doing it, it kind of broke down those silos, and it was more of a flow. It was almost seamless, right? And so, does anybody have any examples or questions on this at all, as far as how do you get your employees engaged? What does a team-based approach look like? Anybody have any examples of how they've approached it or successes?
I'll chime in real quick. But 5 years ago, we went from an ERP system where our accountant was the only one that really was engaged to enterprise ERP system. Very simple because we're a small company. QuickBooks Enterprise. QuickBooks Enterprise is much different than QuickBooks Accounting. And so everybody in the org, which is not many, but production, customer service, which takes in POs and invoices customers and handles shipping, and accounting are all engaged and can see what everybody's doing, so that when we have order to cash integration, production planning, customer service, and accounting is aware of the flow and is engaged in not every order, but nearly every order, because we sell by lot code. So production needs to be engaged with customer service at the time of that order. Sounds like it may be a little cumbersome, like there's not a lot of automation, but things happen very quickly. This is I hesitate to say it's a small part of their job, but the individual actions that take place are quick and everybody's aware of what's happening. So that's what we've done to make a change, and I'm sure many large companies are. But silos are created, but we've done a tremendous job of knocking down silos in terms of implementing an enterprise an ERP system.
continuous
improvements, and with implementing that software, your customer experience is probably improved as well, right? Because you're probably able to fulfill orders and have a good on-time delivery or reduce your lead times and things like that. And then if you think about it internally, you have your hard cash expenses, but you also have opportunity costs, right? Your non-cash expenses of, people handling paper 87 times as an example. So with your flow, you put a little bit more time back on their desk. That's awesome. It's awesome. Anybody else? Okay. The next one is their learning. So the three pillars here is leveraging technology, product flow, one piece continuous, and then partner collaboration. And you could even say client collaboration as well. But just from a learning standpoint, if you look at it inwardly, we had some folks early on in our meeting today talk about how can I train and have that backup person, right? And so when we're looking at this from a good, better, best, from a leveraging technology and a learning perspective, some of the finalists had apprenticeship programs in place, or they had a cross-training matrix that they would make sure that they had, multiple people qualified in certain positions, right? And that way, if someone was on vacation or called in sick, they could have it covered and serve their client. But more importantly, they leveraged that and they were able to have that from a career pathing perspective as well. So the more skills that a person learned, more valuable to the company, and they had the opportunity to potentially earn more money. Looking at it from a product flow perspective, this is just looking at the lean principles and tools, and how could they identify those and really just look at the deployment of those. And the key part of it, from a 5S standpoint, I'll just kind of use the last S in that is sustainability. Not only were they able to deploy it, but they were able to sustain it over time and have that have those improvements, and it really impacted their product flow. If they're looking at from that standpoint, also improve their employee and client experience as well. Then partner collaboration, looking at the interaction with their clients is more of a collaboration, but also looking at it from a supply base as well. They were looking at it, I have my suppliers, I have my key suppliers, and how can I kind of, interact and have really good relationships with them. So, instead of just quote unquote beating them up for an extra penny or nickel per item decrease, will they have contracts with me? Can we put together preferred pricing? Do they have vendor managed inventory? So from a learning standpoint, these are all different areas where they would probe and see how they might be able to improve. And they obviously had some technology wrapped around it as well. A couple clients or a couple of the companies had looked at, as Skip alluded to, leveraging technology, different ERP systems to help automate that. So the key information was there and readily accessible. Any questions here or anything that anybody would like to share? Okay.
Dave, is it
Yeah.
Neural? Did I pronounce that correctly?
Oh, my mnemonic aid is like Norelco, but it's
Neural.
getting dated because some people don't know what Norelco is. Norel.
Yeah, well, hi. So you had mentioned at the very beginning, kind of combating firefighting and how you've used some automation to help mitigate some of that firefighting. So if we
Oh,
look at,
no. I wish. I think that was Karen or Aaron.
oh,
That wasn't
okay.
me.
Oh, that was Aaron. That was Aaron. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, I wish that was me. It was Aaron.
Aaron, are you still on where you can, I'm
I
sorry.
sure am. I'm here.
Thank you. Can you kind of speak to how you use technology and automation to help, kind of get yourself away from so much firefighting then? So what you've learned from that?
So Yeah, so again, my focus is HR, so it'll be primarily from that standpoint. But we have a new HR leader who's really, really talented at technology, to be frank. And so she helped us automate our onboarding process and our staffing process in a way that we use ClickSend, which is like a text messaging service that's very economical. So when people apply for jobs on ADP or Indeed or LinkedIn, we can quickly assess their phone numbers and shoot them a text of next steps. So for hourly folks, a lot of times that means open interview hours. And so we send them a text message, it could be upwards of 100 people at one time saying, hey, come in between 10 and 3 today for open interviews. It saves us a tremendous amount of time calling people. And then once they're here, we have a QR code that they scan, letting us know that they're here, which lessens the load on our receptionist. And then we do have a kind of like a skills assessment, and that's done via Microsoft Forms. And so when the person's done, we can quickly look on the Microsoft Forms to see if their skills match the role that we're trying to fill. So it's very much like point A streams into B to C and so on. And then once they are hired, our onboarding is primarily videos. So instead of, having our HR generalist do multiple onboardings a week, our folks can do it, on the computer. Our videos are on YouTube and they watch them. And we also use DocuSign for a lot of our policies. We are in the process right now of automating our onboarding further within ADP. And what we hope that will result in is us not having to do that manual data entry into ADP once we have the paperwork in hand. So those are a few examples of how we've automated our systems. The other thing that we've done is when we offer VTO, voluntary time off, we have a link that employees can click on to request that time. And we also have an attendance line that's phone and link. So when people select the link, a manager gets notification that the person has requested the voluntary time off. And then possibly the most profound way, in my opinion, as silly as it sounds, is streamlining our no call, no show process. What we were finding was that it was really hard for us to stay on top of staffing because we didn't always know who was here and who wasn't. The demands of the business were, keeping our leadership from communicating that to HR. And so now all they do is start a no call, no show process. HR implements, tracking it. So meaning, this person wasn't here a second day, we can process the termination. So it's all those like really little tedious things that suck up a lot of time that we've automated with things like ClickSend, DocuSign, and some of our vendor partners like ADP.
Yeah, that's great, Erin. Thank you. So if there's one lesson or learning point that you took away from this journey that you would share with others about leveraging technology, what would that learning moment be that you would want to share?
I would say for me personally, it's not to be afraid of it because it's really, it can be scary to make the leap to, I would even say give up, control of the process a bit, and just have the person sit there and do the orientation without someone else carrying it out on HR's behalf. But if you let go a bit, it can really save you a lot of time. And I think secondarily to that, just real quick, is just be reasonable with your expectations of, there will be some bumps in the road. We have people who need a lot of help with our automated systems. But the juice is worth the squeeze on that. For one person that needs a lot of hand holding. We have 20 that can zip through it on their own.
Yeah, thank you so much, Aaron, for sharing that. That hopefully will help others and make them not feel as afraid about it, and to understand that, yeah, like you said, there are going to be some bumps in the road, but we're going to get through those.
The best
The area of best practice with integration really goes looking at those 4 different things there. And, you know, when I think about this particular category, and once again, looking at, good, better, best, the second and the 4th bullet point were a couple areas that really stood out, right? To what extent did the organization involve their employees? And what was their culture like? And, a couple of the finalists really were able to speak to that, where they had transformed their culture, and they had done that by obviously, looking at, not only operationally improving their business through lean manufacturing, etc. But it was almost like a causal effect, right? They focused on getting their employees involved, looking at meeting cadences. They would have daily huddles on the shop floor, looking at their safety, quality, delivery boards. They'd have Gemba walks, and it really kind of transformed their culture. And a couple of them had done employee engagement surveys where over time they'd seen where they had those improvements. And not only was it the meeting cadence, but they could also look at it from an order to cash involvement, because people became more involved in that as well. And when you kind of go to that first area, we took a look at the approach and the deployment from a KPI standpoint. The folks on the factory floor started to realize that the work I do today is very important, and they could see how it ladders up and impacts the key KPIs and helps the company achieve their objectives. So I'm going to go ahead and pause and see if anybody had any questions on this, or if they had any insights, or just an example of how they've been able to do this as well. Maybe some successes they've had for looking at their culture, past, present, future, how they've been able to put together programs or ways or means to have their employees become more involved.
I think you hit a really good point. And when you're looking at progress doesn't mean perfection, right? And so if it's better than yesterday, or better than where you were, you're moving in the right direction. And as someone who feels like everything needs to be, tied up with a bow and perfectly buttoned up all the time, I think it's really important as leaders to be okay with this is good enough. And good enough doesn't mean bad at all. It's just getting there incrementally instead of from starting and then finishing. It's okay to have steps in between. And I would just challenge us as leaders to take that in consideration when looking at the progress we want to make and the steps in which we want to take to make that progress.
That's just really great
Insight and very powerful. And Aaron, when you were describing that to me, I remember seeing a graphic that I read in a magazine, and it talked about success. A lot of folks, when they look at success, and if you look at it from a chart standpoint, they're wanting it to be very linear, right? But then when you look at what actually happens, you have a lot of peaks and valleys. You'll get there, but to your point, there's a lot of great opportunity, a lot of great progress that's made, and you may have setbacks, right? And so, how can you learn from those setbacks if you have them, and re-engage and continue to make improvements. So no, thank you for sharing that. That's awesome. All right, the next couple of slides, we're going to talk about a couple of different questions that are in the actual benchmarking. So this is kind of what it'll look like for the folks that haven't done this before. And so we'll just talk about the first one here is, does your company have a strategic plan? And so here, you have your different check boxes, but it's, as Kathy alluded at the very beginning of our time today, there's a question, but there's a lot of detail hanging underneath of it. And so if you think about the things we've talked about from an Adley standpoint, you can kind of see where each of the questions in this category or other categories, there's a lot of detail behind it. And but anyway, from a strategic plan standpoint, these are some of the items that you'd want to self-assessing against. So do you have that plan and vision? Do you have regular meetings? Do you look at that time frame and everything like that? So I think Skip had an excellent example where they do have their plan. They meet once every 4 months to kind of review it and course correct. And I know that Brian had shared that this is an area that he may want to look at trying to work on. So some really great input and information shared. Does anybody have any questions on this in particular, suggestions or anything they would like to share?
I had a question. We had done an engagement probably about 4 or 5 years ago. It was a strategic planning course. And I found it overwhelming. And possibly, I don't know if it was just on our journey, if it was too much too soon, or for our size company, it was too much. And so it did end up collecting some dust. So I've been trying to get it to a 1 page. Is that realistic? Like, what are the key components that, and is it different depending on the company size, to make it a real life, living, breathable plan that's executable? Because when we walked out with pages, we didn't have the bandwidth to execute it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, from a one-pager perspective, the Danaher organization, they leveraged Hoshin Conry planning, and it's a cross matrix. I can even type that in the chat box, but it's HOSHIN and then KANRI. So it's a one-pager. It shows your 3 to 5 year breakthrough objectives, and then what your annual breakthrough objectives are going to be. So what you're focusing on this next fiscal year, and then what are your improvement priorities? So how are you going to meet those annual breakthrough objectives? And then your targets to improve. How do we measure our incremental success? And what resources are being deployed to each one of those? So each one of those opportunities has an owner. Now, behind the scenes, you've got other tools you can use. There are bowling charts. So it's a month over month plan versus actual. So that as you go through your fiscal year, every month you're reviewing, how are we performing to our plan? Are we on track? Are we not? And if we're not, we're going to write some countermeasures and understand why and take action. And what's really supporting the whole thing in allowing it to be deployed and implemented well is there are detailed action plans that are scripted out so that we know step by step what we're going to do when throughout the course of a year so that we can meet our objectives. So, but as for a one-pager, the Hoshin Conry, it kind of has it's all on 1 page.
Super, thanks.
Mm-hmm. And if I can add to Dave, just looking down your list here, the CEO gets input from managers and managers from employees. The part of the Hoshin Conry process is what Dave actually had on his infographic that he showed at the beginning, which was catchball. And that's part of that process. So as we're building out the strategic deployment piece of this, we're cascading that down and getting feedback through the organization, so that the organization is fully aware of what the strategic planning process and deployment process is going to be, and they have input, so that that input, they have ownership ultimately in what is deployed, so that, you know, we're all one team and we're all pulling in the same direction.
Thank you, Jim. Appreciate that.
Great question. Great question. All right. So the next one here, just a couple other questions. There'll be one maybe on financial management, looking at, you know, how well do you manage your inventory, receivables, payables, etc., your people processes, and people from a team's perspective. And if you think about that, as we kind of went through the different ADLI categories, we talked about that, and you know, how might you know, you take that step as far as, you know, improving it from an order to cash standpoint, you know, looking at people, looking at the culture, looking at the processes, the way they work, trying to make it easier for them and everything like that. And we had some great folks share, you know, what they're doing to make those improvements. So definitely appreciate all that. Anything here from a benchmarking standpoint that you'd like to dig into a little bit deeper?
Just one question, perhaps, or maybe a comment about the difficulty we're having. And that is, you know, people process. How well does the company engage and support their people? So we try to offer a lot of things and, you know, be sensitive to the people's needs, if you will. It's hard to, see the well, I see the value, but what am I trying to say? It's hard to see the response, you know, the beneficial effect. And my point is, they sometimes assume it. They assume that they should have different benefits. They should, you know, how do you communicate the value that the company is sacrificing in terms of profitability, if you will, because we're offering these things? That's the type of thing that I'm struggling with. And I guess it's maybe the answer is an annual letter to the employees outlining those benefits that they're receiving. And that in and of itself, you know, communicating that, maybe that would enrich their engage in culture and engagement.
That's a great question, Skip. And
I know that if I look at my prior positions and prior roles, we did exactly that in, you know, a few companies where, you know, we had folks that across different functions, different organizations, they would talk about, hey, you know, I'm going to get paid more, etc. What we did is we gave them a total cost, if you will, of, hey, here's your benefits. We did that every year, and it was right around the time that you know, we do the benefit enrollment. And so it was a letter of, hey, here's your base compensation. If there was a bonus program, here's your eligibility for that. But then I started looking at the non-cash, right? So what is the cost of your medical and dental? What is the cost of your life insurance? What is the value of your vacation? Is there a 401k? What's the match look like, and things like that? And then from that standpoint, you know, it helped drive a little bit more awareness from an employee standpoint. And then the other thing that we would do, we didn't do it every year, but every other year is we do an actual an employee engagement survey. And we had what we actually had called skip meetings as well, where, you know, I would talk with folks directly on the factory floor. They wouldn't go through the middle managers, but, you know, we'd get that information and kind of use that to help course correct as well. And maybe course correct isn't the right word, but, you know, if they're doing employee engagement surveys and they're confidential, they may be a little bit more forthcoming. And there was a couple of aha moments where maybe not on the benefit side of it, but just the way we worked and things like that and communicated, it helped us out as well. So that might be another thing to suggest.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to, rather than, throw these benefits at them, that there's some way you can, you get some, you're expecting something in return, but how can you deliver that message that there are expectations of elevated performance, elevated culture? How can you, how can management ask, like it, without being really blatant? I guess that's maybe what you need to do.
Yeah. If you take a look at the
Approach and deployment pieces of the Adley model, I think there could be some ways there to maybe take a look at how you're doing work today, and then we could look at, maybe are there areas for opportunity, and do that.
I think just from a cultural perspective too, the lean perspective on this would be when we look at our organizational chart, traditional organizations may have, been a pyramid, right? Where you've got the president, the CEO at the top, and then everything deploys down to the front line. And it's really that front line. They're the value adders in the organization. They're the ones that are actually making the product or service for which our customers are buying. So lean takes perspective and takes that organizational pyramid and flips it upside down. And it's called servant leadership. So that your frontline team is at the top of the organizational chart. They're recognized as the most important value adders to the organization. And everyone else in that organization there is basically there to ensure that they have everything that they need to be successful. And anyway, it just starts to, I guess, change the culture. And it has other soft benefits to where now maybe employees aren't, coming into work thinking, hey, what is my employer owes me this, or, they should be doing that. I guess it just starts to diffuse some of that and makes it as though we're, everyone has ownership in the organization and we have expectations. We've got our strategic planning and deployment that we are being held accountable to reaching our North Star. We have our lean daily management, our metrics, our KPIs for meeting today's voice of the customer. So we're working as one team to ensure that we're meeting all of those targets.
Jim, I think that's excellent. Putting the reverse organizational chart. Now they have this is they're the ones, I wouldn't say, they're the ones that are responsible. Now we're going to help you achieve this, all these measures, as Dave maybe alluded to, in terms of the measurements of excellence, if you will. If they don't achieve that, well, what do we need to do to help them achieve it? I like it.
Awesome, thank you. All right, we're going into
Our last slide here. So we've covered really all the information for the benchmarking, the Adley, and some of the sample questions. I just want to kind of share a couple of things here. So from an IMEC standpoint, if you're interested in learning more about operational excellence, starting your journey, there's a couple of ways that we could help support you. One is we do lean manufacturing assessments, and those are complimentary. It's there's a pre-assessment which takes maybe a couple hours for you to fill out, and then we spend 4 to 6 hours on site. And then the output is a report on best practices, kind of where you're at in recommendations. And for those of you that may be interested in this, and you're interested in, I don't really have a strategic plan and things like that, it really encompasses a lot of the areas that we talked about today. Strategic planning, all the different tools in lean, DEI, et cetera, right? So it's pretty comprehensive. And at the end of the day, what we leave behind when the mini project is completed is really a nice resource of, this is where you're at today, this is where you aspire to be, and kind of here's that path of how to get there. And then really it's up to you on how you'd like to get there. You could partner with IMEC and we could do that with you. Or if you have experts internally or people internally that can do that work, that's great as well. The next item is, quite a few companies, they want to kind of start on their lean journey, but they don't know where to start. And it might be because their employee base doesn't have a lot of exposure to Lean. And so we have a program that we offer. It's Lean Simulation 101, and it's actually a very fun event. We can have, I think, up to 22 or 24 of your employees participate in this one-day workshop. And we start a company together called Buzz Electronics, and we go through 3 simulations. So the first couple of hours is just friendly classroom training to get you kind of exposed to some of the Lean terminology that we shared and the concepts. But then you go through 3 rounds of simulation. And so if you think about it, the first simulation is going to be horrible, right? Nothing's going to work, right? Firefighting, just like we talked about. Talk as a team, we'll make some improvements. The next simulation, a little bit better. Talk about that. And then the last simulation will be run very smoothly. And the reason why we set up that is because we want to kind of see let folks understand kind of what that transition will look like, right? So you'll get exposure to some different Lean tools, full systems, layout, flow, 5S, but really it's just to get that exposure that if you start on that journey, you can see where you may be at today, but by doing some implementation, staying with it, working those KPIs, having that plan and executing, you'll see those incremental improvements over time. And, basically at the, as you progress through your journey, you'll have those improvements. And from a people, process, systems, and structure perspective, you'll see a lot of improvements. So if either one of those are of interest to you, please reach out to either Jim and or myself, and we'd be happy to talk about that with you more or see how we might be able to support you in that. So with that, I just want to thank everybody for their time today. It's been great. I always enjoy doing that, doing these webinars and events and just kind of talking with folks. It's a great opportunity for me to learn as well. And I just want to thank Jim for being here with me because having someone with his background and expertise is awesome. He can answer a lot of the harder questions. So that's really awesome. So we got about 10 minutes left. So I don't know if there's any other questions.